Oh, please.
Oh, well, thank you, Doug. Well, I'm delighted to welcome Linda. Linda is head of the craft laboratory at the University of Gothenburg. And this is an institution that I think all countries have. That I think I'm very jealous from the UK perspective that we don't have a craft lab, because you blend, as I think, if I've got this right, the tangible and the intangible cultural heritage and the science, cutting edge science with tried and tested technology. And Linda herself, I see, has got an MSc in conservation and also a vocational degree in traditional boat building. So Linda is the epitome of the craft laboratory, marrying the science and the craft, which I think really is this interdisciplinary approach is really the future for conservation. So I'm delighted to welcome Linda. She's going to talk about pine tar, a product which we used extensively in England for naval, so-called naval supplies. It was a product which the British Navy were always keen to secure copious quantities of, and depending on the political situation at the time, a range of ports in the Baltic were engaged to supply us with. So, but how's it made? We don't really make it in the UK. But Linda's going to hopefully tell us all about it, how it's made, how it's used, and some of the latest findings from the scientific point of view as well. So Linda, thank you very much. If I could ask everyone to turn their videos off and to mute themselves, please, and then Linda will be able to share her screen.
Okay, thank you. I just start to ask to do sound check and say thank you for inviting me. I'm going to try to give you an overview on what's been going on in Scandinavia the last years within tar and what's on the agenda for the future. No one is waving or screaming, so I think you can all hear me. So I'm going to start to share my screen now also. Well, so yeah, here. Seems that many of you, or a few of you, already knows about the craft laboratory in Mariestad. Makes me happy to hear. I've been working with this national center since 2010, and I'm gonna introduce the craft laboratory by telling some about the institution, the department that I work in the University of Gothenburg. Actually, conservation is a poor translation into the Swedish term of kulturvård. Kulturvård is a small academic subject that comprises knowledge and skills and focuses on bringing resources from the past, both tangible and intangible, into present and future uses. It has been referred to as management of change. In the Department of Kulturvård in Mariestad, we have developed this integrated approach as from the concept that was defined by Sir Bernard Fielden in the 1980s. And I'm sure several of you are familiar with the concept of management of change. So word by word, Kulturvård is translated into culture plus care, to care for culture. And as an academic subject, we have an integrated approach to practice, and it's about mending, repairing, and maintenance based upon deep material knowledge, cultural understanding, and crafts. So in our department, we have higher education and research within 3 dominant fields, which are built environment, conservation and conservation science, and crafts. I'm not sure if every one of you visited Sweden yet, but here is where we are situated. University of Gothenburg is a huge university. We have 53,000 students, and in Mariestad, I'm not sure, can you see my arrow when I do like this, the pointer? Yeah. So here you have the region of Västra Götaland and the lake Vänern. And 2 hours north of Gothenburg, you find Mariestad, where we teach where we teach crafts, and also where the National Center is situated. So here we have the infrastructure for the university's higher education and research, and also teach building crafts, gardening, and what we call landscape preservation crafts. We also teach traditional painters. So one purpose of the craft laboratory is to bring research into practice and to involve craftspeople in the process of inquiry. The way this is done is through what we call the laboratory approach. Both the craft sciences and heritage sciences are young and transdisciplinary scientific domains, embracing a wide range of research disciplines. Both heritage science and craft science enable deeper understanding of the past and improved care for the future heritage. So this is a method that we try to apply in the practice. To the left, we try to state a typical conservation process where you deal with the physical heritage. Often you have your object and you create a project where you curate what needs to curate, and then you have your results. But in this process, you have had problems and questions raised. You might have developed new methods and new insights and knowledge. And what we try to do in the laboratory is to use these situations as laboratories. We try to capture the questions and the problems, and we also try to understand and from that develop research questions and research problems that are required or asked for in society. So these laboratories or heritage sites are case studies on which we build our scientific work. Yeah. These are 5 ongoing research projects that I like to show you as examples on the broad scale that we work. But the perspective that we bring is the practice-led perspective of these different areas, you could say, of inquiry. And today I'm going to talk some more about what led to this project with small-scale tar production, and then tell you some about that project as well. First, I'd like to give you a crash course in Swedish wooden building tradition. And this is really a crash course, so please bear with me. I'm going to start by showing you this map. It shows the Scandinavian area. And as you can see, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. We have the boreal forests and subboreal areas. And in these areas, in the boreal areas, we have been building with spruce and pine, Pinus Sylvestris, and in the subboreal areas, we have been also done some of our buildings with oak, but primarily still pine and spruce in these areas. And only the red areas and on the island of Gotland that Michael spoke of earlier, where he had been producing tar. In these areas, we have a more extensive use of oak in the buildings. And here we also have the timber-framed buildings. The rest of the country looks like this, I'd say. These are examples of wooden buildings that you can find. They could be almost anywhere in Sweden. We have local differences, but the log timber house and later on in history, with standing timbers or planks, with wooden panels, and of course the red paint, together with tar back a few hundred years ago. But today mostly it looks like this. You have oil paints and this red slum färg, water-based color. So this was the crash course. And before we had the modern clay tile roofings, there were lots of wooden roofs all over the country, and tar was used more extensively also on the vernacular architecture. But where those wooden shingle roofs and wooden roofs have been preserved are on the woods, on the churches. I'm just going to give you a tip. If you want to learn more about Swedish wooden building tradition, this is an anthology that is almost 20 years, but it's still the best, I'd say, the best book you could have to see and learn and understand the whole span and the whole width of the wooden tradition that we have in Sweden. Yeah, so I go to the churches because this is, I'd say, where the tar question or the tar research was restarted in Sweden. You can say that in Sweden, in 1975, with the European Year of, I'm not sure they call it conservation. In Sweden, we call it byggnadsvård. You can say it was the starting point for restorations in Sweden on a more broader scale. And for the first 20 years, these restorations and the maintenance and the use of traditional material and methods was mainly performed by public institutions, in museums, and by National Property Board and National Heritage Board, for example. Where we today have another situation, we are now in an area where the interest for taking care of historic buildings have literally exploded, partly thanks to the social media, but it started before that. We have lots of small-scale businesses and private persons who on a hobby scale are becoming experts and becoming really good at doing all different kinds of traditional material and methods. So today I'd say that this is really a popular movement that has taken off and people have become aware. But with this 40 years of conservation of the built heritage, we can today also see that some of the rediscovered traditional knowledge that we have applied since might have been misinterpreted or simplified, so that we today have problems in maintenance. And this applies, for example, with lime mortar, linseed oil paints on iron roofs, and not least, wooden shingles with tar. So, I'm just gonna, sorry. Yeah, just to start, I'd also like to show you some pictures from 1931 from Garda kyrka in Gotland, in the island of Gotland. And here you see under the beams in the roofs, you see an old roof. And the old roof you see is from the 12th century. The newer roof on top of it is from the 14th century. It was the church was choir was added, so the old roof was built in, and in 1931 it was uncovered and it could be more closely investigated. And so here what you see here is the oldest wooden shingle roof known in Sweden. And as you can see, it's not only wooden shingles, they are covered with thick layers of tar. And what is extra interesting is that this roof today is built in again, but it's possible to visit and examine because it's constructed almost like a museum there with lights and staircases. So you can walk around in it and have a look. And of course, one of the examinations that we really would like to do is to be able to analyze this tar. Unfortunately, we don't yet have the investigation methods for examining tar the way we like yet. So we wait a bit. But this is one of the objects that we surely want to examine. Yeah. So today, mainly church buildings, bell towers, and some castles and mansions have wooden shingle roofs with tar on them. They are made by pine or oak. I'd say most of them are pine in most of Sweden. But I see that Lisa Skanse is with us today, and she's done a huge project on wooden shingles. So she's the expert on them. But we can find shingles that are from 14th century up until today on these buildings. They have been dated with dendrochronology, so there are quite a few examples with really old shingles. And almost all of the really old shingles have thick layers of tar on them. And with these two pictures, I can illustrate why the Swedish church since 2005 have asked us at the craft laboratory to work on that tar problem. Because here you see to the right we have a wooden shingle roof with the modern method, the method that we started doing in the late 20th century. And then to the left, we have examples of medieval wooden shingles with thick layer. We call it panzer layers of tar. Very characteristic surfaces and appearance. And of course, to the right, there are parishes who call and say, okay, it was tarred 7 months ago, and now we don't see it's nothing left on the surface, everything is gone. So you have very short lifespan, and the tar is, there are questions raised about whether the tarring is needed at all because of this. And of course it costs a lot of money, and somehow eventually the wooden shingles also start to deteriorate. So this was the problem that the Swedish church presented for us. And also I'd say from a national level, but also from dioceses and from parishes all over. So since then we have gathered information and done documentation about tarring practices to try to understand. And in short, we can say that what we have found was a non-functional practice. So here in 2016, a conference was launched between where Norway and Finland and Sweden were invited. It was the initiative came from the Church of Sweden, and on this conference they tried to identify all the areas that we didn't feel that we knew enough. And here you can see that it was quite a few areas. We didn't know about the production today. We didn't know if we had supply of raw material. We thought we had quite a limited knowledge about application. And then also there had been the REACH chemical legislation in the European Union, which is about health to protect the inhabitants. But this was something that could really affect the use of tar. So I think actually that the REACH question was what really brought us together. But what happened here was that we decided to start to work together to try to identify a common terminology, to identify parameters for quality control, to understand the function of the tar. I say it was and it is as basic as that. We are not completely sure, or we can't say what the function is. And also how production methods affect quality. And one of the reasons that we want to investigate this is because the tar used today and also back in 2016 is mainly imported tar from China, Serbia, and Turkey. And we don't know. Actually, we can see when you look in the barrels that the tar differs a lot in these different. And analyses show that we can't always be sure that it's actually tar from Pinus Sylvestris. And from a owner's point of view, the Swedish church has a very high standard when it comes to labor and labor, what do you call it, security, and that it's a fair trade product. So they have also raised questions about that, and they haven't gotten the answers that they want from the importers. So so to be able to become a better what do you call it, buyer of tar, we need some parameters for quality control and analyze to understand the product. And to do this, we formed the Nordic Tar Network. And in the Nordic Tar Network, there are the national heritage and property boards in Norway, Finland, and Sweden participating, the churches of Sweden, Norway, and Finland. There are researchers and universities, and also teachers from vocational schools participating. From Sweden, there are also several dioceses represented and national trusts. And then what I find almost important in this is that we also have the entrepreneurs and the craftspeople, and we together with the NGOs and the museums. So I'd say that we cover the whole professional sector in the heritage field. And as I said to Doug earlier when we met, the heritage sector in Sweden isn't that big. And especially when it comes to quite heavily and detailed research, the Nordic cooperation is crucial, because we can't have the resources to deal with all these questions that we have. So it has been a really useful network. And this is how we look. Most of the time we'll stare up on the roofs and church bell towers and so on. And what was really good was that we got funding from the Nordic Baltic Mobility Program for 3 years. So we could meet twice a year. And we did. We met in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and we were Vikings. We tarred, and we visited different production, both bigger production entrepreneurs and small-scale associations that worked in very traditional way. And just by doing this and talking about the tar and understanding the tar and the processes, we today have reached a new level of understanding about what tar is, but I don't think we are done. And I'd also like to say that the two biggest importers in the Scandinavia also participated in every meeting. So we also got a discussion about quality and what we ask for and what we want delivered, together with the persons who can hopefully deliver this to us. And they also described the situation where, when they started their business 30 years ago, they had domestic producers who delivered to them, so they could sell Swedish tar. They had Swedish tar on the market, and they could deliver a few tons every year. Today, all of them have stopped producing due to age, and this is also the situation in Norway. In Norway, they in the 1990s established a tar bank for the stave churches, and they educated tar producers, and were educated. It was traditional tarring kilns. But today, when the Nordic, or during the period when Nordic tar network have been working, there are only 2 producers left in Norway who produce in the traditional way. And they are over 70 years old, both of them. And I say Finland is the country that has the most working production line, domestic production line. And it's there are 3 entrepreneurs who are a little bigger, who produce in a semi-traditional way, you could say. If I go back, it's the picture in the middle here. They have a production line that produces more and in a more efficient way. But then we're out of production if we don't look into local heritage associations. And they are often run by old men. And the COVID situation for these 2 years has really, drawn the rug away under their feet, because they haven't kept this work up, and they gotten older during this period. So right now there's a crucial situation in the Nordic countries where the demand for tar, for domestic tar, or if you say Nordic domestic tar, is high. The Swedish church says they will buy every liter at a standard, at a 3 times they pay for the imported tar. They will pay for domestic tar to anyone who will produce it. But of course the problem is that the volumes they require are so big, so the small scale local associations can't deliver. Yeah, but I'm gonna go back a few steps and just give you a definition of what pine tar is. So the problem with pine tar is that it's a complex organic chemistry. It's so complex that we can't give it a quantitative definition. So what we have is two qualitative definitions that I'd like to share with you. First, we can say it's an artificial bituminous hydrocarbon produced through pyrolysis and out of the specific species of wood that is Pinus Sylvestris. But the first definition is made by characteristics. I'm just gonna, sorry. Here, there you got it. Okay, I can see it. And the characteristics found in tar is that it boils at 200 degrees. It dries slowly by polymerization and oxidization. It's a thermoplastic semi-solid. It's frost resistant, water repellent, and elastic, so it doesn't flake when it's on the surface. It's acidus, but it's not biocide or fungicide, which one might think it would be. And it penetrates underlying paint layers. And then the surface gets a crocodile skin-like pattern that you saw on the previous pictures. And it solves equal. And the source of this is a colleague of mine. Her name is Arja Kjellbom, and she's a conservation. She has a bachelor degree in conservation, and she's a metallurgist and a traditional painter. And if you have questions of a more chemical nature, I'd be happy to forward them her contact to you. And then the other definition is also formulated by chemists, and that definition is that pine tar is a distillate produced from trunks, stumps, and roots of Pinus Sylvestris, and by traditional pine and made by a traditional pine tar pit, kiln or retort process. So this definition was made by the Finnish association called Long Live the Tar. You have the Finnish name of the association written on the PowerPoint. My Finnish is not what it should be. So, but I could also send you links to that association if you like. It's that association Long Live the Tar that has been the driving force in making tar a substance that is allowed to use and sell in the Nordic countries today. Because the REACH legislation that I told you about, it says that any chemical substance that is manufactured or imported to the EEA area must be registered, otherwise it can't be sold. And this is if you produce more than 1 ton per year. So this is somehow the basis for future entrepreneurs and existing entrepreneurs to continue to exist, is that we have this registration. So the association Long Live the Tar, together with the Finnish church, paid for this registration. And what is interesting, I think, is that when they made this registration, as you can see, they had to do some testing. And the testing of these results are important because it shows that this is not a toxic, it's not classified as a toxic substance. Okay, so, and then I'm going to tell you some how it is and has been produced. Sweden, together with Finland, was during the 17th and 18th century the world's largest exporter of pine tar products. And the export was worldwide, and this tar was known as Stockholm tar, since it was shipped from Stockholm. But most of the tar was produced in Österbotten in Finland, the north of Finland. But then slowly the use of tar changed in Sweden for a number of reasons. And of course, the wooden boats and the fleets were declining in the 21st century. No, the 20th century. And also the use of tar on roofs changed. Different chemical preservatives were developed and used extensively. And during the 20th century, it's become more and more rare with the traditional production. The Second World War gave the tar production a small revival because it could be used for driving instead of oil products. But after the Second World War, it was completely out-competed. And today it's the most extensive production by local heritage associations are in Gotland, and the Soide lag, the teams of Soide, where they work on an ideal basis. So So here you have examples. To the left you have traditional methods, and when we say traditional methods, I'd like to point out that tar have been produced for at least 1,000 years, and it has been produced quite pre-industrial ways, but very large, on large scale, before the industrial area as well. So in a farmstead, you can have a small pit, or you can have your own dal. Skärdal is this round one is called skärdal, tar dale. I think you can say dale in English as well, or is it just Tolkien English? But then to the right, you have the retort production, the more industrial production that was introduced 150 years ago. And of course, these processes were about to use less energy in producing, but also to be able to get other kinds of product from the pyrolysis process. And when you do the tar, make the tar, you want as little. It's a pyrolysis process, so you want as little oxygen as possible into it, and you want it heated for a long time, but not too warm. And this was something that was harder to maintain in the retorts. And also, this is what we think happens today in the bottom production in other countries, that they might burn it too warm because it's hard to control. And then I'm going to say something about processing of the raw tar to make a protective surface on the roof. And this is the part of the tarring from the production, from the forest and the production to the roof. This is the part of the process that we know the least about. The historic sources show that the tar from the kiln was separated into different fractions for different uses. Sometimes the uses are explained, but not always. The raw tar, the first tar that came out of a kiln or a retort, was vrakt. It was judged. The quality of it was judged in the harbors before it was shipped out. This is also something that we know very little about. And none of these separation in fractions and so on is still in use in the small scale production either. So this is here we only have the historic literature to lean on. But what we know, what's done, was that the raw tar, as we call it, was heated. And one of the processes that it was heated to something called beck. And beck is a very, you reduce the tar, you could say. You make it become, you thicken it. And this was, so you produce a completely other product that you can use in other ways as well. And today, when beck is sold in Sweden, it's a bitumen, it's an asphalt product. So it's not made by tar any longer, but it has also been an important export product earlier. So to somehow conclude what we have agreed on in the Nordic Tar Network and the research that has been performed the last 20 years, that the tar on a roof should perform an erosion layer on the wood. In Swedish, it's called offerskikt. It's called sacrificing layer. I don't know if you have the same English word, but sacrificing layer is a very good word because it really describes that it's the tar that you want to sacrifice. It should protect the wood underneath, and you always need to have a well maintained sacrificing layer so you don't sacrifice the actual construction. And this is what such a layer would look like. This is Høyjord stavkirke in Norway, and here it has been restored. So the panels are new; they are approximately 20 years, and they have been working deliberately to make the surface become this protective layer. So here you see where they have established a layer that does prevent UV light and moist to get into the wood. But this takes quite a few times and a few years to get this protective layer. And since we lost this tradition and we didn't know, there are tests going on, you can say, and you need to tar much more often than we have been done. What have also been done, especially it's very clear that it has been done in Norway, because you can really see it on the surface of the churches, is that you mixed in additives like coal and sand to make the tar build this layer very more quickly. And this is Borgund Stavkirke, one of the more famous saved churches in Norway. And it becomes really obvious when you look at these surfaces that it prevents the rain from reaching the wood at all. And also you can see from pictures on the Borgund Stavkirke how much the tar differs in appearance, if it's just been recently tarred or if it has been or if it hasn't, so the weather and wind have eroded the protective layers for a while. And of course you can never get a complete layer. You will always have places where the rain and the snow wears it out quicker, but that also adds to the character of this historic material. And then, of course, when we in the Nordic Tar Network agreed on this, there are, of course, what you in Sweden would call the exception confirming the rule. Because then we found a 200-year wooden shingle roof that didn't have these thick tar layers. It's in Jämtland. It's the church of Matmar. Mats, I'm sure, know of this. And it was thoroughly investigated, and over 100 shingles were examined very carefully. And what they found was that, you see, it was an exceptional high quality in the pine that the shingles were made of. And there were no, now I lost the English word, you have the sapwood. There were no sapwood at all on any of the shingles, and they were all standing wood, and they were all what do you call it? They were all slate. The surfaces were all slated. I think you say slated, yeah. So we did one of the roofs were reconstructed in this way, and it was tarred twice without any additives or extras, the way it was found. So with this, I just like to show that we start to understand more about this material. But since it has been used for 1,000 years in different with different local traditions and on different materials and so on, what's most important for the Nordic Tar Network is, of course, to not wipe out the traditional methods and the historic layers, and at the same time meet the requests and the needs within maintenance of the churches, if we're going to be able to maintain or keep wooden roofs in the future. So this is really the challenge, I think. And then I'm just going to give you a brief, a briefing on projects going on in Sweden primarily right now. And in Gotland, they have made 26 test areas. Here they use boards for roofing, wooden boards, not shingles. And they tested all different kinds of recipes. and additives and mixed it with the tar at different temperatures. And just on the left, where he keeps his hand here, this is the one that has been treated with the method in practice today, that you tar it once and then you wait 2 years. This is 1 year and 2 months after it was put on the first time, and only by doing it twice in the beginning, as you see here, you have a better result. But still, this result is not a one you can be pleased with if you are maintaining a church. And then what has really also taken off the last years is that private entrepreneurs and small parishes are doing their own testing, and they're all own experimenting to make the tarring last longer. Of course, the Ingatorps barn, Kalle Melin's restoration project, that he, together with all the other engaged people, won the Europa Nostra Award in 19, sorry. Here we have full-scale testing on the newly laid roof, and here they have 2 recipes from 1740 that is tested. And it's far from the practice today. The entrepreneurs and the parishes are nervous when they get this tar this thick on their roofs. They think it will drip all over the lime plasters and their red facades. On the experiences from the Ingatorp barn, we this summer used the best functioning mixture and used it on the reconstruction of Södra Råda medieval church. So it's also a project that Kalle Melin has been involved with, and it's a full-scale reconstruction. So this roof is completely new, just laid on the church, and the only 2 things that differ in this test is that here to the left they use the imported raw tar in the recipe, and to the right, where it's a bit less glossy, they used kiln burnt tar from Gotland. So this is now they really start to narrow down their parameters in this test. So this could be a really interesting test in the long run to see if we, with the imported tar that we a few years ago thought wasn't the best tar, if we can gain functioning result with that one, it could be one way forward with the roofs that aren't that interesting from an historical point of view. But if we still want to keep wooden roofs on our churches. Yeah, here are examples. What could happen with the dripping if you apply it in the warm summer days. But actually in the recipe it says you should apply it on a warm summer day. So yeah, it's correct in a historic way. Well, so today, from my perspective, I'd say that we learned quite a lot about application of tar. We fixed the legislation, the REACH problem that we have back in 2016. We start to understand characteristics of high quality in tar, and we have absolutely gained lots of historic knowledge, and together between projects and countries we share historic literature now. So we have started a kind of building the understanding of historic tar production on the first hand, I'd say. But we still need more work on the quality control and the supply of raw material. So today I'd say that the challenges, and maybe challenges that are even bigger than we had 2016 or realized 2016, is the changing climate. A warmer climate in the Nordic countries, the effect of that is up until today that we have shorter periods of cold, preserving winter time. We have more, the temperature going up and down over 0 degrees. And this is wearing out the material in a much faster way than if we had just cold winter. And of course, it becomes damper in general. Both spring and autumns are damper. So when the degrees drops below 0, the shingles are filled with water. So the deterioration process is going so much faster right now. And together with that, we have a discussion in forestry. I don't know if the news have reached England, but Finland and Sweden we are getting banned from the European Union because of how we produce our wood. And this picture, it's spruce in the picture, and we don't use it on the woods, but this is how we produce our forest today. And this forest production, it doesn't produce any new raw material for shingles, because it doesn't produce the high quality in timber that we need. It grows too fast. It isn't allowed to grow as old as we need. We need it to be 100 years or 200 years older than it is when it's taken down right now. And also we don't get the roots needed because the trees die too young. So they haven't had the time to get the resins and the fatty acids into them as they need. So this is also a emerging problem, and already today most of the wooden shingles put on roofs in Sweden are produced by imported timber from Siberia. Maybe the production is made in Finland, but the timber is always Siberian. And not and our last challenge is the production. I'd say that even if we had forests to harvest, if we don't have anyone who wants to produce the tar, of course the trees could become something else, but production is both in Finland, Sweden and Norway the alarming problem today. And that is why we formed an application about production to make it easier for the production to happen. I just have to look at my watch once because it's over here, so I know the time I have left. Oh, sorry. Yes, we just started a project to build networks amongst entrepreneurs to get them to understand that this demand is out there, and also to work together to form networks of producers so that we can get a strong production in the future. And I'm gonna skip to this because what we are also doing is testing modern ways of producing so that we can scale up the production. Maybe we could get 4 cubic meters in every production situation, and that would be really helpful. And to do this, we are developing furnaces that is heated with electricity instead of firewood. Yes. And before I say thank you, I'd like to invite you to Mariestad in the future. We do a built heritage convention every other year when it's not COVID, and we hope to do it in 1 year from now. And what we also do is a craft conference, a scientific craft conference that you could also contribute with untraditional presentation forms like workshops and showing craft instead of writing about craft. Okay, thank you. I think